The gravel driveway of my cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains wasn't built for luxury sedans or judgmental glares. It was built for muddy boots, wood-hauling trucks, and the kind of peace you can only find when your nearest neighbor is a mile away. Or, at least, she was supposed to be a mile away. I had bought the perch to escape the frantic pulse of the city. It was a modest, two-story cedar cabin tucked into a thicket of pine and oak. For 3 months it was heaven. Then, the Highland Estates Collective expanded its borders, and with it came Brenda. Brenda didn't just live in the neighborhood, she patrolled it like a warden in a beige blazer. She was the self-appointed president of the HOA, a woman whose hobby was measuring the height of grass and the vibe of porch furniture. To her, my rustic retreat was an eyesore that lowered the property value of the McMansions being built further down the ridge. The warning shots. The conflict started small. A friendly reminder tucked into my door about the stack of seasoned firewood on my porch. Then came a formal citation for the non-approved color of my bird feeder. It was cedar, just like the house. "Mr. Vance," Brenda had said, cornering me by my mailbox one Tuesday morning. She smelled of expensive perfume and repressed rage. "We have standards here. This isn't a campground, it's a community." "Brenda, my cabin was here 10 years before your community paved the first road," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "I'm not part of your HOA, my deed is independent." She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a cold, predatory expression. "We'll see about that. We've absorbed the surrounding parcels for security and aesthetic unity. You'll be receiving the paperwork. In the meantime, that vehicle in your driveway needs to go." She pointed to my 1978 Ford F-150. It was a classic, restored with love, but to Brenda it was a mechanical husk. "That truck stays," I said firmly, "and so do I." The gathering storm. Fast forward to Saturday, I was planning a small homecoming celebration. My 2 cousins, Jax and Miller, were coming back from their 3rd deployment. They were Army Rangers, men who had spent the last decade in places the world forgot, seeing things most people only see in movies. They were more like brothers to me than cousins. I was out on the deck flipping steaks on the grill when a black SUV with ESTATES security emblazoned on the side crawled up my driveway. 2 men in tactical vests, the kind you buy at a surplus store to feel important, stepped out. They looked like they'd spent more time at a buffet than at a shooting range, but they carried themselves with a borrowed authority that made my blood boil. "Can I help you?" I called out from the deck. "Property inspection?" the taller one said, snapping a photo of my porch. "We've had reports of unsanitary conditions and unauthorized gatherings. Per President Brenda's orders, this property is under review for seizure due to repeated violations." "Seizure?" I laughed, though it was hollow. "On what grounds? I haven't signed a single HOA document." "We'll let the lawyers handle that," the man sneered. "For now, we're authorized to secure the perimeter. That means no guests. If anyone shows up, we're turning them away at the gate." "This is my private road," I shouted, but they just turned their backs and started placing orange cones at the base of my drive. I felt a surge of genuine anxiety. I knew Brenda was wealthy and well-connected. She was trying to bully me out of my own home using security as a blunt instrument of intimidation. I looked at my phone. A text from Jax 5 miles out. "We're bringing the thunder. Hope the beer is cold." I looked at the security guards sitting on the bumper of their SUV blocking my entrance. I looked at the stakes. Then I sat down and waited. The arrival. The sound started as a low hum, a vibration in the chest that you feel before you hear. It was a rhythmic, mechanical growl that echoed off the granite faces of the mountains. The 2 security guards stood up, looking down the long, winding road that led to my cabin. The hum grew into a roar, the unmistakable guttural scream of heavy-duty V-twin engines. Then they appeared. 6 Harley-Davidsons rounded the bend, riding in a tight, disciplined, staggered formation. At the front were Jax and Miller. They weren't in uniform, but you didn't need a uniform to see who they were. They wore leather vests over gray hoodies, their faces obscured by dark goggles and heavy beards. They looked like a Viking war party that had traded horses for chrome and steel. Behind them were 4 of their teammates from the unit. These guys were built like brick walls with scarred knuckles and eyes that had seen the horizon of the world. The security guards moved to block the path, holding up their hands in a stop gesture. Jax didn't slow down, not an inch. He roared toward the orange cones, the front tire of his fat boy kicking a cone into the woods like a plastic toy. He skidded to a halt inches from the SUV's front bumper, the heat from his exhaust shimmering in the mountain air. The other 5 bikes swarmed around, circling the SUV like sharks around a leaking life raft. The silence that followed the engines cutting out was heavier than the noise. Jax hopped off his bike, pulled off his helmet, and shook out a head of buzzed hair. He looked at the guards, then at me on the deck. "Hey, Silas, these the guys who didn't want us coming to dinner." The confrontation. The security guards had lost their swagger. The tall one reached for his belt, not for a weapon but for his radio. His hand was shaking. We have orders," he stammered. "This is a private community, you're trespassing." Miller, the quieter and more imposing of the 2 brothers, stepped forward. He stood 64 and moved with a terrifying, liquid grace. He leaned in close to the guard, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Son," Miller said, "I've spent the last 18 months in a desert where people actually know how to use those vests you're wearing. You're standing on my cousin's land. You're blocking a veteran's welcome home party. Now I'm going to give you 30 seconds to move that shiny mall cop truck before I decide it's an IED and neutralize it." At that exact moment, a white Mercedes pulled up behind the Harleys. Brenda stepped out, her face a mask of purple fury. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at the line of bikes. "This is a violation of Ordinance 42, no loud mufflers, no loitering, security arrest them." The guards looked at Brenda, then at Miller, who was currently cracking his neck with a sound like breaking dry wood, then back at Brenda. "Ma'am," the tall guard whispered, "we aren't cops, we're just contractors." "I don't care," Brenda screamed. "They are threatening the peace of Highland Estates." Jax walked over to Brenda. He didn't yell, he didn't even look angry. He just pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a document I had emailed him days ago. "Ma'am," Jax said calmly, "I'm Captain Jackson Vance. This is a copy of the original land survey from 1922 along with the 2024 county tax map. My cousin's property is a grandfathered enclave. Your HOA has no jurisdiction here. In fact, by placing those cones and that vehicle here, you are currently obstructing a private thoroughfare." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "And as for security, my friends here and I are on leave. We're tired, we're hungry, and we have very little patience for people who play soldier while harassing honest men." Brenda opened her mouth to retort, but Miller revved his engine again, a sudden, violent crack of sound that made her jump nearly a foot in the air. "The party is starting," Jax said, his eyes cold as flint. "You and your security team are leaving now." The flight. The transition was instantaneous. The guards didn't even wait for Brenda's permission. They scrambled into their SUV, reversed so fast they clipped a pine branch and tore off down the road. Brenda stood alone for a moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She looked at the 6 massive men, the heavy machinery, and the sheer, unapologetic "don't mess with us" energy radiating from the group. She realized that her clipboard and her ordinances were useless against people who lived in a world of actual consequences. She huffed, spun on her heel, and retreated to her Mercedes. She peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust that was quickly swallowed by the mountain breeze. I stood on the deck stunned. Jax Miller. Jax looked up and grinned, the hardness vanishing from his face. "Hey Silas, is that ribeye I smell? Because I haven't had a decent steak since we left Fort Bragg." The resolution. The rest of the evening was legendary. We didn't just have a barbecue, we had a celebration of freedom. The roar of the Harleys was replaced by the sound of laughter, the clinking of bottles, and stories of the road. My neighbors from further down, the ones who also hated Brenda but were too afraid to speak up, actually walked over when they saw the security force flee. They brought potato salad and extra chairs. For the first time, the cabin felt like part of a real community, not a collective managed by a tyrant. As the sun dipped below the ridge, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and burnt orange, Jack sat next to me on the porch steps. "She won't be back," he said, taking a sip of his beer. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because people like Brenda only bully people they think are alone," Jax replied. "She saw the bikes, she saw the unit. She knows now that if she touches this cabin, she's not just dealing with a mechanical husk of a truck, she's dealing with us." I looked out at the line of Harleys parked in the grass, their chrome reflecting the dying light. They looked like guardian spirits. The HOA Karen had sent her security to intimidate a quiet man in a quiet cabin. She expected a victim. Instead, she found a brotherhood. And as the sound of the crickets returned to the woods, I knew the peace of the perch was finally, truly secure. The mountain was quiet again, save for the crackle of the fire and the low, contented hum of men who were finally home.